Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Yudine, and I'm the crazy person who opened a second-hand bookstore in Strand. About 2.5 years ago, I had this crazy dream in a garage full of books, and I said I'm opening a bookstore, and absolutely everybody thought I was crazy, completely mad. But here we are almost 3 years later, and the only reason why we have made such a massive success of this bookstore is because of wonderful local talent like Ebrahim here. So this entire shelf on my left-hand side are local writers from the Western Cape who have had book launches and book discussions here at Sunset Books. And it's wonderful to see how the literary community supports one another. And about 2 or 3 months ago, Ebrahim's other little book, I think it was The Slavery.
Slavery to Citizenship.
Yes. Popped into our second-hand section. And I thought, wow, here's another book about the history of Strand. I'm absolutely fascinated by the rich and diverse history of this area. And I tried to track this man down by posting stuff on Facebook. And suddenly everybody said, oh, I know him, here's his number. Oh, I know him, there's his number. And I managed to get hold of him because for me, it is so important that we not maintain our history, but that we keep talking about our history. You know, a lot of these things, and when we see the older people, the older residents of the Strand popping in and telling their rich stories about the area, my biggest worry is that those stories are going to die out with them. So we have to, in the old art of storytelling, keep talking about our history, because that's how our history is passed down. I'm fascinated by the richness of the history in this area. Once a month we do a talk at Sunset Books where we put the old photographs of the Strand on the screen. So what the buildings look like now and what the buildings looked like 200 years ago. And it's obviously a great privilege to have Ebrahim here today. So let's put our hands together for Ebrahim Rhoda.
I thank you very much, Yudine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning. Goeiemôre. Yes, baie dankie Yudine vir die geleentheid. Ek waardeer dit. And I hope I can do justice to your bookshop.
Thank you so much.
To give you some perspective of my presentation, it's necessary to go back to the Dutch period of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, a period during which only the Dutch Reformed Church was allowed to be practiced and propagated. No other church was allowed. In fact, if you did dare to do that, you faced the possibility of forfeiting whatever you have or even being put to death. So Islam was actually banned in the Dutch period. But sadly enough, or rather fortunately or inadvertently fortunately enough, the VOC became the biggest agent for Islam. And here I use Arabic quotation, and people here in the audience will know better than I do. It's very simple. It's that وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. You can plan, and God plans, and He is the greatest planner of all. Now, why do I say that? They became the biggest agent because between the period 1652 to 1795, more than 200 political exiles, people called the Urankayan, which means people of political and economic influence, they were exiled to the Cape, 200 of them. Among them, the Sheikh Yusuf, who lies buried here at the Kramat, and Tuan Guru, who's on the Tanabara in Cape Town, and many others. In addition, they deported many imams, they called them the convict imams. And the third group were the convicts. If you transgress any Dutch law in their outposts over in the east, they would post you to the Cape because it's a source of labor, cheap labor, to run the public works of the VOC at the Cape. So, sending so many Muslims to the Cape, it changed the demography. Because what we find then, we have a completely set of people here not in control, not under the control of the VOC, because there's their own system under the banner of Islam. You can put my body in chains, but you cannot You cannot steal my ideas and my thoughts. And that's how Islam thrived at the Cape, in the clandestine. Then 1804, I'm going to jump because of time. 1804, under Batavian rule, there was relative freedom of religion, which means if you could now practice Islam, propagate it publicly. But in addition, it also allowed so many other denominations to come in. They came from Scotland, they came from Germany, the Rhenish. In fact, the oldest is the Moravian and the Nathanael. They were already here because we have the same school like the Protestants. So, in addition to that, from Ireland, from Scotland, from England, from France, they came. My question was, when so many missionaries came, did our Imams Islam have a counter for them? And my curiosity drove me to write this little book, to see, did they have a counter for the missionaries? And in this book, through the records obtained from the Rhodes University of the Methodist Church, I found enough evidence that the Imams in Cape Town, especially in Cape Town, not so much in the rural areas, they were giving the missionaries a run for their money. So much so that after emancipation in 1842, 1/3 of Cape Town was Muslim. And in their records, they admit that they cannot succeed in stopping this conversion, or rather reversion to Islam, of the slaves and the local indigenous people. Right. So, when the missionaries came, many of the Muslims in Cape Town, they lived in abject poverty. Many of them were fishermen there on the forefront. But some of them moved into the interior to squat, to work on the farms. And any farmer would have been too happy to have an artisan who's a bricklayer or who's a harness maker and who can build the staples. So many of them squatted on the farms here in the Hollands Basin, now called the Helderberg Basin. My question is that when the missionaries came, they targeted these Muslims and the slaves and the Khoi people to bring them into the fold of Christianity. My question is, what happened then? That the leadership in Cape Town, and this is the time of Imam Ahmad of Bengala, the Imam of the Owal Masjid, the period 1822 to 1843, he was the Imam. So they sent an Imam out this way to counter the missionaries. And that Imam, his name was Abdul Samad. He came from Semarang in Indonesia. Do I have proof that he's an Imam? We'll come to that later. So we see between 1822 and 1832, more than most of these men moved from first to the farms, and finally when the missionaries came, this Imam moved amongst them to gather them. Now, how did he move? There were no roads. The only road came in 1845. They call it the hard road from Cape Town as far as the East River. How did this Imam move? I found in a civil court case, one of the Moguls here at the farm that literally owned the whole basin, they were complaining about the Imam. You know what they complained about? The Imam had an old stallion, 'n ou hond, wat kom lorend by sy afgeteelde perde op sy plaas. And so I knew the Imam had a 4x4. He was traveling on a horse. But in any case, and that is how the settlement came about. So by 1832, there were about 28 of these Japanese people. 14 of them came from the island of Java. 1 came from the island of Timor. And the Tamur family of the Strand are now the 7th generation. We can prove the continuity of the community is the very same community that started in 1822. I wrote this little book for the simple reason to keep the heritage alive amongst our youth. And every year we give a free copy, and Professor can vouch for that. Every year we give a free copy to the matriculants in our community. So that they may be aware, may be empowered with the knowledge of our beautiful heritage. Here I show the proof that the Muslims were here. And the guy who came in 1830, his name Paul Daniel Lukov, he was a teacher of slaves Stellenbosch. That's why there's a school, a high school named after him in Stellenbosch, Lukhof. And he writes in his diary, this I found in the archives of the Dutch Reformed Church, hier langs die strand staan die armoedige visserritte van die aanhangers van Mohammedanisme. Of course we know, we call it Islam, we don't follow Muhammad, but he says Mohammedanism. So I have proof in 1830, and this comes out of the records of the diary of Paul Daniel Lukhof. That's 1830. So here, where were they staying? They were staying on little reed huts on the beach. Hy praat van die armoedige vissershutte van die aanhangers van Mohammedanisme. How did they survive? Where they came from, they knew the sea. Right? So the sea sustained them. And here's one guy by the name of Ongu Talon. Ongu Talon is also mentioned in the Testament of the Imam. He drowned in the bay here in 1842. There was a skewed ratio of men to women at the little settlement here at Master Bay. So he had to walk to Sanoi's farm to a farm called Knorr, where he married a lady there, one of the slave women. Subsequently, he must have divorced her because he married another young lady, Dolphina. And when he died, on his paper we found that he, in 1840, in the Ophof Roll, that is a census, that he with his family was settled at Master Bay. Unfortunately, he drowned in the bay in 1842. And he was buried in the cemetery where the present Strand post office is situated. The cemetery was there. They formed the backbone of the fishing industry. This is in the early 1900s. Some of them became, ek het nou nie dat vir jou doen te sê, ek was by 'n familie in Franshoek, en sê die familie is onbeskofryk. Now some of the imams here became quite prosperous, like the Raiduns, and we have a descendant here, Faisal, is a direct descendant, I think he's the 5th generation of his great-grandfather who came in the late 1850s from Batavia, which is Jakarta today. Right? They formed the backbone, and look at this, they're pulling up the boats. Can anybody tell me why they would pull the boats? I'm challenging you. Why would they pull the boats? Because if the tide comes in, the tide will take the boats away. So they had to pull the boat beyond the high water mark. Daarom was die strand se rugbyspelers so kwaai, want hulle is baie sterk en hulle is swaar skeier gedra. Right? Then by the 1960s they built the jetty. From now they could offload their cats on the jetty. And before they do it, they used to do it on the beach. And I remember there was one incident in 1846 when a reverend of the Dutch Reformed Church was complaining about these Malays. While he's trying to preach on the beach, there was no church for the Dutch Reformed Church, it only came in 1880. While he was trying to preach, these fishermen were making a noise. Can't they stop them? It shouldn't go out on a Sunday on the Sabbath. Eventually the Muslim agreed they won't go out on a Sunday. Right? The sea gave them life, but the sea also took their lives. And yeah, I was fortunate. I interviewed his father. He was 16 years old, Mr. Daniels, when they were standing on the jetty in 1942 and they saw the wave pushing this boat onto the reef. There's a little place here in the reef, they call it the Gang. It's a narrow opening, a natural opening. But this freak wave drove that thing onto the reef, and 4 of those Muslims drowned in front of the very community. There was an inquiry afterwards, an inquest, 1943, 28 December. And Amsumaddin was telling me they were standing, and the 2 younger fishermen, the one was Samsuddin Latif, and the other was Saban Wanza. The one was 20, and the other was 22. They so trying to swim. It's about 500 meters from the shore. But the sea was very choppy, and they saw them just disappearing under the waves. The beauty of it, the Methodist Church, because most Muslims and Malay fishermen, they stayed here, and they faced the same dangers. So a beautiful church service was held in the Methodist Church, which was built in 1912. It was here in the main road. And I gave a talk at the Synod of the Methodist Church. Why did they demolish that beautiful church in the main road? Because it was attended mostly by the colours. So they removed it in the apartheid era. They destroyed that beautiful church in the 1950s. Next. From now on, you could offload you don't have to pull your boat because you can lie at anchor. There's a jetty. This is 1950s. By 1864, this comes out of the book of Hopkins, who wrote the history of the Dutch Reformed Church of Somerset West. By 1864, most of the Muslims had built themselves beautiful brick houses with thatched roofs. In fact, my father showed me the house where he was born in 1906. Now what does it tell you? They became prosperous, they made their own bricks. And in the Strand there were huge holes where they excavated clay to build bricks. So we see this community is developing from a little reed hut to beautiful houses, this 1864. I can show you on a map exactly the village was surveyed in 1879, where my great-great-grandfather stayed, right there by the entrance of Wegman Street, on lot number 10, and somehow my great-grandfather stayed on lot number 14. And that's all on this map. It's not very clear, but if you look in the book, it's also in the book, the map pointing out who stayed where in 1879. The question is, these people were occupying prime land near the beach. And the town was now developing as a very popular holiday resort. This is the first hotel. It's where the Sandam Center is now in the Strand, more or less, that position, Anderson's Hotel. So, what would happen to these people who were occupying prime land near the beach? So they made a special law called the Mustard Bay Crown Land Act in 1881. And now they surveyed it, and all the plots were now sold by auction in front of Anderson's Hotel. The question is, what would happen to the plots that they were residing on? Fortunately, the law admits in its preamble that they had occupied the land, they had built dwellings without being stopped by the authorities, so they made this law to give them legal title to the land. This is 1882. And most of those people who received the land, they were Muslim. I checked the records of the deeds office, and I can prove what I'm saying, right? How do we know that he was an imam? Because he says in his testament, "Ik ben de Mohammedaanse priester woonachtig aan Mosterdbaai aan Noord-Holland Strand." There's my proof he was an imam. This is his testament. And we gave the O1 Masjid a beautiful framed copy of this to be exhibited in their masjid, because he came from masjid. Because he says that when he dies, the grote priester Ahmad woonachtig in Kaapstad, that's Ahmad van Bengalen, should come and bury him if it's possible. And he also says they must make the 7 nights, the 14 nights in the hand, the 7 dae, the 100 dae, the 40 dae. So there you see where the tradition comes from. Professor Newton King translated the Testament into English. And this is the first place of worship to be built in the Strand. I cannot tell you the exact date, but it is between 1864 and 1882. The village was surveyed in 1879, so provisionally, I said plus minus 1870, there was a masjid in the Strand already. It's the first place of worship, and just this year, on the 27th of March, it was declared a provincial heritage site. The second one, the first picture is the second one built by Ebrahim Rhoda in 1885. I found evidence in a letter that he wrote that it was not a langar. A langar is a room used as a mosque, but it was a masjid proper built in 1885. And it was demolished and reconstructed in 1950. That's the one that you see on the plane, the Ben Friedman plane. Then the third one came in 1926. They started building. That's the third one. And the fourth one was in 1948 in the halfway. Right? I'm using these pictures to show you these are people who help to retain our identity as Muslims. The imams, not only imams, I'm not going through each one individually, but also the Khalifas. Some of them came from town, like Khalifa Sali. He was married to the daughter of Khatib Railun. And then we have Imam Haris, and this is Akhuya Railun, the grandson of Khatib Railun, who came to Saturday at Mustard Bay way back in the 1860s. Also, women are involved in helping. We call the madaris, you know. When a young girl becomes, when they reach the age of puberty, they would go to these ladies and tell them what happens to your body and how you should clean yourself. These things were all in place, traditional things of the Muslim community. These are some of the teachers in our madaris. And this is a beautiful event in the community. They call it the Tamar. It is a test where the student is being tested whether he recites the Quran correctly. And of the earliest, there's two prominent families, the Wenzel family and the Railun family, the Jitep Railun and Railun Wenzel, actually they were among the first. And the other youngsters is my wife's uncles, Hassan and Hussein, who were also Tamated way back in the 1930s. And this continued under Sheikh Najjar in the 1950s, and it was continued by the late Maulana Yusuf Karam. Najjar, let me just go back to that one. There you see Imam Harun, the person who was killed in jail and the apartheid era, right? And Sheikh Nazim, the president of they were the examiners who came out to test the children whether they recite the Quran properly according to the Tajweed rule. Tajweed is the rules of how to pronounce the Arabic words in a certain place in your mouth, whatever. They were very strict on that. Faisal Dem is in the audience here. Faisal, would you just stand up here? Faisal made a proposal, let us go and record our history on the radio. For a whole year, myself and Faisal with the late Betamaili, we recorded the history of the Muslim community on a fortnightly basis. Thanks to Faisal. The next thing I did, most of these youngsters are ex-pupils of mine. I said, go in the community, collect whatever photos we can. And luckily we had the guy working at the photographic place in Stellenbosch, and we enlarged it into A4 size. So we held our first exhibition. When UWC heard about the exhibition, they requested that we put it up in the foyer of UWC in the library. It was also exhibited at the Islam Expo in 2009, and in 2010 we put it up and take it off because we don't have a permanent venue for the. I made a proposal to change the old police station into a museum, not only for the Muslims, for all the communities, not for Methodist, whatever. But somehow that property was given to somebody else. These are some of the traditions that still exist in our communities. Maulud is actually a birthday celebration of the Prophet. And we have these themes, and you can see men and women. And annually with the birthday of the Prophet, they would have this gathering and cite what we call, I wouldn't say it's a prayer, actually songs or things like that to honor the Prophet. These are the basic principles of Islam. The Shahada, to believe that is one God and Muhammad is the messenger, like Jesus, like Moses, like David. Secondly, that you should pray 5 times a day. Fourthly, you must give of your wealth 2.5%. If it lasts for a year, for a lunar year, you must take, if you have 100,000, you must take 2.5% and give it to charity or normally to an organization that spread that among the needy in the community. And of course, the other one is Saum, there's Ramadan. Saum, fasting in Ramadan. We just finished it last month, I think. And then within the next couple of weeks, we'll have Eid al-Adha, where the pilgrims gather on a plain and they do their supplication, ask God for forgiveness. That is the Hajj. These are the 5 basic principles of our deen. Have our people gone on pilgrim? Yes. This is what the Quran says. And proclaim unto mankind the pilgrimage. They will come unto thee on foot, on every lean camel. They will come from every deep ravine. And today, they're coming from all over the world. And I show you a picture. These are the earliest people who went on pilgrimage in the 1920s. Very few. They went with the steamboats still, sailing boats. In the 1920s, in the 1940s and 50s, These are some of the few people of the community that could afford to go. And then they traveled by train to Durban, get the boat. There were two boats, the Karanja and the Kampala, that take you to India. And you know, they stayed away for about 9 months to go, coming back. Today they do it in 2 weeks, right? And of course, this lady is a remarkable woman. It's called Atijumi. She's a Wenzel, related to my father. She was selling for sisters and incense and little cakes to save money to go on pilgrimage. Amazing woman. She died in Mecca. My father was, she's my father's aunt. He was there to help to bury her in Mecca. These days we fly, it's cheaper. But today it will cost you must sell your house if you want to go on Hajj. Am I correct? About 150,000?
Yes.
150,000 per person to perform the Hajj. And then you can only do it for 2 weeks these days. When they come back, they're beautifully dressed, you know, the Midora. And some of those Midoras are used when there's a wedding. And when they married, then the bridegroom must be taken off the stage and would afgehaal word. And then normally the people who are Hujjahs, they come to take her off the stage. These are all customs. This is the Hajj. Last year, 1.6 million performed the Hajj. And they're making the mosque even bigger to accommodate more pilgrims. Education. I did a study of our school that between 1950 and 1960, there were 166 Standard 5, grade 7 students or learners, and only 10% of them matriculated. Very few of them went to high school because there was no high school in this area. The first one came to Gordonside in 1952. So you had to travel by train to town, Trafalgar, to Bridgetown, Zonnebloem also was up to grade 8, and then Livingston and Gerald Cressy, those were the high schools. So for the first, I would say from 1822 when the Muslims came up to 1850, there was no primary education for the children of the fishermen until the Methodists came, and for them we are grateful. They built a little hall with a thatch roof and a dung floor. And their records indicate the majority of the children attending this school are of Mohammedan parentage. By 1889, they enlarged the school. In 1912, they demolished it and built another school in Wesley Street between the building of Freedom and Co. and a beautiful church. And then in 1935, they moved to the new school, the Methodist Mission School in Saddlesey Street. Today it is the Lochnof primary. The group areas, they had to move out, so they moved to another school, another new one in the main road. That was demolished in 2009 because the road is supposed to come through there. So, in this picture, the picture points to my mother when she was about 8-9 years old in that school, the one that's built in 1912. And the teacher at the back is Ebrahim Rhoda. He was my teacher in grade 8, standard 6, in that new school in the halfway. And the Dutch Reformed Church, the school was held in a little hall there. I think that church hall is now given back to the colored, so-called colored community. And then they built the 2 classes in 29. And in this picture, we see my wife's mother sitting next to the teacher there at Lake Arno. I don't know where I got this picture, but I got it somehow. And then, of course, we had to build our own school because the missionaries were trying to convert our children to Christianity. I think the fishermen are something, because one report says we can't get the Mohammedan children to come to school on a Sunday because Sunday was catechism class, was gospel classes. So die slamse, die fishermen was slam genoeg, hulle gaan nie ons kindertjies skils maak nie. But in fact, they bought their own school eventually in 1928. We had our own school. And this comes out of the Modern Outlook. It's a paper that appeared just for 2 years. And they bought the land from Farsi Fora. He was one of the big barons at that time, plus Ben Friedman, the big land barons. And so we built out, so they had a bazaar in the town hall. I think I should show that one. Yeah, there's a town hall. So they had the bazaar, and you know how much money I raised for that bazaar? £60. Nou 60 pond was gevaarlik by yourself, I think. And most of the people who raised the money were the women folk. They had different stalls at the bazaar. And the mayor of the town opened the bazaar in the town hall. So we built our own school that's in Fagan Street opposite Hendrik Low. These are some of the pupils who attended the school. And the Amin Badr, he's there, Amin Badr in the middle there with the bald head. He gave a detailed description on the radio what it was like when the school opened for the first day. Hy sê, en toe staan ons allemaal met ons wit hempies en ons brein, ons vaarboekies, en die ouers staan allemaal wat wanneer gaan ons skool oop vir die eerste keer. This is 1928. Prince Ikaram from Turkey came to visit the school, and it was on the front stoop of the school. The first principal, because when the school opened, there wasn't one qualified teacher in the community. So they had to import a teacher from Cape Town, the principal, Mr. Adams. With him, you see Zubaydah Khan on his right. She was the first teacher of the community to qualify. And next to him on the outside is Sister Sharifa Khan. Her father, or their father, eventually became the manager of the school, Mr. Hassan Khan. He had the business in the Strand, where ShopRite is now. He had a huge business there. Right? And that is Zubaydah. She taught at the school for 40 years. And I was in her class in Sub A. You know, Sub A. And eventually I taught with her at the same school. I became the principal eventually. And she died in 2014 at the age of 97. Then we moved, the group areas came and we were moved out of the CBD. But luckily, the leaders have had the foresight to build the school even before we were moved. So in 1957, we moved to the new school in Maidre Street, in Nolte Street, in what they call the Velter Street in Esley. When I became principal in 1991, the first thing I did was to build a proper office, because we had to share the toilets with the children, and that wasn't very dignified. So I said, no, we have to have our own toilets and our own office. And this, what happened to the school, it became the Cosmo Bioscope in the Strand, and the lower picture here tells you where it was today. They brought a backless seat right through. In 1971, you can see that young man daar, so wat het dan geword van Tom. There I was teaching for I started in 59, so that's about 12 years. And there we see Maulana, he was just relieving one teacher who became sick. He's our senior imam of the community. And the principal at that time was Mr. Crombie. Now I cut the picture off because most of these teachers were wearing minis. And a Muslim school is not supposed to have minis. So how did I put the picture up like that? So I cut the picture off, you don't see the minis. And by 1991, I was the principal, and you can see the growth of the school. So we focus on one thing, and there I must praise our leadership, especially the late Maulana Yusuf Karan. He used the mimbar, which is the pulpit, to encourage our families, send your children to high school, send them to university, send them to institutions of higher learning. And I can say this, from a small fishing village way back in 1822, we've come a long way, and you'll see later. All right? We also had our brigade. When the Queen and King George came in 1947, they came with a huge battleship, the Vanguard. So Princess Margaret was there to see all the brigades marching in front of her, and the Strand was also there marching in front of Princess Margaret. Some people, like Jaffi and Mr. Sultan, they took it on further in 1967, but eventually, because there's no one to take the lead, it went defunct. But we also had our scouts, they call themselves the Pathfinders. That's in the 1930s. And then we have our teams, we like to sing, right? And like Cape Town, you have these teams marching through the streets. We had it in the Strand. And they would go from house to house and sing, and they would be served nice tea and persistent and things like that. That is the senior group, and then there was a junior group also in the community. And this is normally at the end of the year, to celebrate the end of the year. We had our tailors, there's not one of them left today. My father was a tailor too, he's there, the second one. He says, don't become a tailor, the factories are mass producing. Go and educate yourself, right? And then we have a family, famous family, the Badroom family. They were upholsterers. And some of their sons continued to work, but I think that has also died out. Then we had our own midwife. We called her Mochikanti. She used to walk with a little case. And you gave birth in your home. No gynecologist. No special instruments. And she caught most of the babies born in our town in that period. They called her. There was a beautiful article in the, I think it was in the Burger about die voetvrouw, the midwife. Women played a prominent role in the community as entrepreneurs, especially in the winter months when the boats can't go out. They would make little things like the sisters, tamalets, you name it, and sell to augment the income of the family. We also had our sports, our rugby teams, and we also had our cricket teams. Then this is where we stayed until the group areas came in the 1960s, and then they sent in the bulldozers to destroy a community who had lived there for generations. Now, the question is, where are we today in 2026? The picture that you see there is a committee that was established in 1966. I am the only surviving founder member of that committee. They have all passed on. But what we did, we brought the Jamaas together under one umbrella body called the Strand Muslim Council. And sadly enough, after a while, some of the people who came into this merger, they sort of withdrew again. So we still have a situation where we have different congregations in one town, not under one body. The ideal would be to have it all under one body. But my take on the whole thing is, unity doesn't mean that you have to be together under one body. Unity can also mean there can be diverse views, but we can share the common things that faces the challenges, and there we can work together. Forget your differences, but work together. The next thing is education. And here I pointed out earlier that so few of our children matriculated. Today, we can say proudly, we have so many in diverse professions and also, I would say, trades like tilers and builders and bricklayers, what have you. But most of our children, because this town was built by Muslim and Christian labor. Today our youngsters don't want to be plasterers, they want to be IT specialists, they want to be doctors and lawyers. It's a good progress. And we've lost that ability in our community where we had so many artisans. What we focused on was education, and you will see why education and why I showed you all those pictures of the imams and the khalifas, because those were the factors that helped us to retain our identity. We are here for more than 350 years here in the colony, way back from the time of Sheikh Yusuf, and we have retained our identity as Muslims. And for that, we say, Shukran, terima kasih. That's an Indonesian word for thank you. Shukran in Arabic, danki in Afrikaans, and thank you for all our forebears who made this possible, and to you people who are sitting here today. Thank you.
Ebrahim, I think that was absolutely fantastic and fascinating. I'm going to open now for the floor to ask questions, because I know I myself have a few questions. So let's open the floor for anyone who wants to know anything. Any hands?
Ebrahim, shukran so much. That was really detailed. There's a lot to take in. But unfortunately, we're recording. Alhamdulillah. Ebrahim, I just want to ask from your study in terms of an order, in terms of the masajid that was formed in Cape Town, first, second, third. I'm going now beyond the Strand areas now. If you maybe can share that.
Why so many masajids? Is that your
No, not why many. Well, maybe you can talk on that too, but that's mostly the first, second, and third, and fourth, and so on. Why the Cape Town? Just
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think in my book I also refer to the Strand as a little bullcalf. Because what we saw in the bullcalf is the development of so many massages over time, right? In many cases, it's breakaway groups. In many cases, there were court cases as reported in Ahmad David's book, Mosque of the Bullcalf. There were more than 20 court cases that led up in the High Court about who should be the Imam. There was another infighting. And that's the same part. If we go to the first half of the 19th century, we see there was a drive by the Imams to bring everybody into the fold of Islam. They were very successful. But then came the issue of differences. And I think we must be honest, it still exists in our community today. I cannot hide these facts because they are facts of life. Until the time when we learn it's also happening in the Middle East among the Muslim leadership in the Gulf states. Look, they're all in the palm of the West. They get supplies, arms and everything, Pakistan, Egypt. They get huge amounts from the American government. They have forgotten their responsibility to the Ummah. They see our children are being killed in Gaza. They see our children were killed in Iran. Not one of them will lift a finger. And this is a sad part among the Muslim leadership of the world. It's sad for me to say it as a Muslim, but it's a fact of life. Coming to the mosque here, I think it was more an issue of familial loyalty. I have my family and we have our little group. So we built out that. It first started as a langar. Now a langar is an Indonesian word that's used for a place of worship where you can have your madrasa and you can make your salah, everything is a langar. In fact, when we were in Yogyakarta, we could see the masjid, but on our way to the masjid, we passed the lane and there was a langar. So we went to the langar to perform our salah there. The second one came in 1880. The first one, I'm not 100% sure of the date. We put there 1870 as tentative. Because in 1864, there was a langar, and I show you where it was on the map, because my father showed me the building. It was just behind the Rauter Cinema in Henneke Street. That was the langar of Khatib Raimun. Then the second one was the Imam Sulaiman Sadat built 2 houses on Crown land. And in his inventory, when he went in for insolvent, it states that one of the rooms is used as a Malay church. So it was a langar. That's 1869. The beauty of 1869, there was a halal slaggies at the Strand 1869. But unfortunately, he went insolvent. He didn't have the official stamp of the MJC, but it was halal. That is the second one, 1885. The third one, there's a lot of also infighting among the leadership. And that is how the third one, not going into detail, that is how the third one came about in 1926. The fourth one in 1948 was also a breakaway, and we got his own masjid in the halfway. So that's how the 4 massages came about.
Any other questions?
Okay, you can hear me.
Okay.
On the note that you've ended now, in terms of, for want of a better word, egos, that the community is spread and infighting, etc., etc. It's one of the most surprising things when I came to visit your late father in my matric year.
Okay.
I had to find that 2 mosques virtually a couple of steps from each other.
Absolutely.
you also allude that the community is split, the current one. So with all your knowledge and history in terms of how these splinter groups affected the Muslim community, have you got any remedy based on your experience of bringing together this community here in the Strand, which is a small place by all standards?
Yes. I tell you what, in 2022, we were celebrating our 200th anniversary from 1822 until 2022. So I wrote an open letter to the leadership of the community, because I was aware that we were fragmented at that time, you know. There's even another one that came in the Golden Barrel, the Nika Mosque. So we must face the fact we are fragmented. But I made a suggestion, this is an opportunity to celebrate our heritage, right? Let us all work together to do the planning of how we are going to celebrate. Unfortunately, some people have blinkers on, they can't see the beauty of it. So it's fake, but I did try. And my suggestion now is that despite the fact that we are fragmented, there are so many issues on which we can work together. You don't have to be one body. That would be the ideal. But come to a place where we can decide, look, we all face the issue of drugs in the community, right? We all are aware sometimes of teenage pregnancies in the community. We are also aware of so many other social evils in the community. So other many challenges that our youth are facing. Here is a time for us to pull together, pull your resources and your expertise and work together, still in your local camp, what we call unity in diversity. And that is what is needed. But as I said earlier, I told somebody one day, look, what is the ideal? The ideal is one umbrella body. But if that doesn't work, what is the alternative? And the alternative is we work together, share our expertise, and work together to face the challenges jointly. Let's make dua that Allah will grant us that hidayah, that we can reach that. Yeah. Any more questions?
Just one short question.
Yes, sure.
Ebrahim, you alluded to the fact that you visited Indonesia, I think Malaysia as well, wherever else. How did that information that you picked up there help finding the roots of the Muslims in Cape Town?
Yeah. The fortunate part is that we have found enough records here in our own archives. Like, I'll give you a classical example of Khatib Railut. We knew that he came here in the late 1850s, early 1860s. We also know that he married a local girl, by the name of Jamila Wenzel. Now the Wenzel is another story. Maybe I should have another launch. Because the Wenzel himself, when I gave a talk in the archives, I'm coming back to your question now, right?
Just push the mic up.
Okay.
It might be off.
Is it off? I don't know. I gave a talk in the archive in 2006, and there was a German in the audience. And I made a statement and said, one of the founding members of the Strand Muslim Community are the Wenzels. Then the German stood up and he said, what, Wenzel is German? They said, oh, you're so right. But they love the Japanese women. I made a joke. But then when I found the records of my paternal grandmother, when she died, it indicated that her father was Wenzel and the mother was Lina. Now I was curious. Wenzel is a German surname. So I went to the archives and I traced that the Germans came here in 1742. The first generation, he was a cartographer. They came from Dresden. So I know for a fact that they were German. The next thing I had to find Lina. Who is Lina? So I went to the slave registers. And I found, I first had to find a German here in the basin. Now there's a thing what they call the Opgaberollen. It's a census that you do annually. And in 1808, I found there's a German here in the Somerset West area. And where was he? He was on the farm of the Mortals. He was a teacher. There were no public schools, so he was a tutor of the children on the farms. It's the first form of education in the basin. He was about 18 years old. So he was born, I traced his birth. I found his baptismal also in the archives. He was born in 1780. So this is 1798. He's 18 years old. Now the beauty of this, you must have heard about Lady Anne Barnard. She was the wife of the secretary to the governor. So she was, I would say, the first lady in absence. And she was fond of writing and making sketches. So she came from Cape Town on a specially built ox wagon, first to the Myburgs on their farm, near Lis. In the morning they had a beautiful breakfast there. Late afternoon they arrived here on the farm of the Mortals, the boss. But when he came there, the Mortals were absent, conveniently, because the British took over the Cape in 1795, and they were not very happy with the takeover of the British, the first occupation. So they locked all the cupboards, but they left this youngster, Carl David Wenzel, on the farm, who was the teacher, to welcome them with a few slaves. So he told them, look, I feel very bad because everything is locked up, but I'm going to make a meal for you. So they slept there for the night. But while she was there, she talked with him. And he tells her that he's a teacher, and he gets so much money, and they treat him like they're equal. And then she made a sketch of him. She was fond of sketches. Now, I've written a book about the Wenzel, and he's on the cover. Now, how did I get the picture? One of the Morgels is the Professor Andre Morgel in Perth, and we corresponded. So he put some of my research on their website. And so I told him about the German, and he said, Mr. Rhoda, look at my book, there's a picture of him. So I found a picture of him, but I found the original one in the archives. And I could now prove that the matriarch, or the patriarch of the Wenzel family is this German, Karl David Wenzel. So ek het eintlik German bloed in my Have I answered your question? Ek can answer the wall. You fine?
Ebrahim, I have a question. Where in the Strand were the original dwellings of the fisher people located? Was it Pieces of Black?
Yeah. You see the map that I showed you, the map is in the book. It's between Church Street and Van Randeveld Street.
Okay.
And between the beachfront and Fagan Street.
Okay.
That is the geographical area where they were all. And the sad part, or rather curious, why were there 3 or 4 people on the same plot? Because in the deeds office you will find that 2 to 3 people were sharing the same plot. And my take on the whole thing is that when they were set free, many of the slaves, some of them moved to Cape Town, some of them moved to the settlement, where there was an established Muslim community, and some of them embraced Islam. In fact, my matriarch, she was a slave on the Morgels, born in 1791. And during the slave period, slaves were not allowed to marry in the church. In fact, Barnabas Shaw wrote in his diary that the slave would walk with the Bible with his boss to the church, but then they had to wait outside, they couldn't go in the church. You see that apartheid mentality come van daai jare af. It's not only now with this sort of statute, put it on the statute, but the perception of apartheid was already there, the discrimination. And Barnabas Shaw writes to say, not mine, it's from their records. But then they realized that most of the slaves are embracing Islam. Now, the white settlers were afraid to have their slaves baptized, because once he's baptized in the church, then he's no more slave. So he would lose money and he would lose labor. So they actually preferred the slaves to remain Muslim. This comes out of the records of many of the guys who write about the slave history in the Cape. Are you satisfied with that?
Yes, thank you.
If I can maybe say that, asking you asked a question about the boats. My grandfather had 3 bucks here in the Strand. I saw one of them was lying in the back of the yard. So the names were Stacey, Springbok, and Kudupi. And the only reason why I knew that one of my uncles actually told me the whole history about it.
Wow.
Yes. Sorry, I just want to also, sorry Mr. Rhoda, just about the right Mr. Rhoda. 2 things quickly. I also think that the tradition about building mosques, it's just not about separation of the families. I think it's a tradition also. If you go to the island of Lombok, which I was privileged to visit, they call it also an island of 1,000 masajid. There's another name for it. Wherever you go, you see masjids, and they're still building masjids. So I think it's a lot to do with tradition, most probably, in my opinion. And just to reference to the Ragun family, on my last day there, unfortunately I had to leave. Somebody told me about the name Ragun, but it's been spelled without the U, which we've got in our one. So there is a reference, although Mr. Rhoda and I think Abdul Salam actually proved that they were coming from Semarang. But there is definitely somewhere relation which we must still finalize. Okay, so.
I think I stood up on your question about my visit overseas, what effect did it have, right? Sure, we have records here that we can prove they came from Batavia, which is Jakarta today. And in 2011, the Consul General sent out the Deputy Consul General to the mall to have lunch with me. And the question was, could I prepare a paper about Saint Yusuf that lies buried in the Kraman? So she sent us over to Makassar. It was a long flight with Emirates up to Dubai, then down to Jakarta, and we overslept. We slept in Jakarta, and the next day another 2 hours, right on the eastern side of the archipelago, the island of Sulawesi. And Sulawesi is the island on which Sheikh Yusuf was born. That part of the island is called Goa. And there is a mausoleum of him there also. And there's another mausoleum of him on the island of Sri Lanka. Because the Dutch feared this man so much that he fought with them a guerrilla war like the Afrikaners did with the British during the Anglo-Boer War. He did the same thing. And time and again he escaped, but eventually they promised him, look, if you surrender, we'll do leniently with you. But they remained on their word. Eventually they locked him up in the castle, and then they still feared him, because he was a political and a religious leader. He's a man that studied for 20 years in Magna, in Yemen, you name it. So they posted him to Sri Lanka. And they appealed to the Dutch, please let him come home. They still refused. And they still feared him, so they posted him to the Cape in 1794. That's how we landed here. Now, when I came there, some of the students, there's a small university called Hasanuddin University. So some of the students asked me, why is it that we know so much about Sheikh Yusuf and they don't know? I said, well, at least he's the most documented exile among the many who came here. In fact, there were 2 brothers who died there in Frankfurt. And there was another, the Raja of Tambora, who was on the farm fair Legion. He married the daughter of Sheikh Yusuf. There were many of these great men here in our very own vicinity. We've got a beautiful history. And not many of us know about that. Maybe I'm bringing a little bit out. So the student asked me, why is it that you know? So I said, look, what we know is from the documents that we have in our archives. But there are documents also in the Rijksarchief in the Netherlands. There are also documents in their archives over there. So there are so many buried on the Tanah Baru. Of some of them, we know something. Of many of them, we know very little. So I told the students, up to you to do research and find out about all those political exiles that were sent to the Cape and other places. The fortunate part of all this research, I've been taken over to Indonesia 3 times, but not a cent from my side. Alhamdulillah. Any more questions?
Anyone else?
I don't think so. I think like Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar and so many imams that came with him. So I would just like to know that was there any connection between those imams to the Strand community of his demise?
Yeah. I have not found any documentary evidence. The guy who did the biography of Sheikh Yusuf is Professor Suleiman Dengo of KwaZulu-Natal University. And then there are many others, some descendants of Sheikh Yusuf have also written books about it. Some of them have been published in English also here. I think the one young lady, she came here, her name is Musdalifa. Musdalifa. Her name is Musdalifa. She also wrote something about Sheikh Yusuf. There is a guy who believes that they are direct descendants of Sheikh Yusuf. I won't mention his name now. But my point is, if you can make a claim like that, you need to show me your documentary evidence. Because in academic piece, there's a lot of oral history. We don't shoot down oral history. But if you write an academic piece, you need to produce your documentary evidence. And what I found is that many of the customs that we were in one place called, it's on the Highlands, in Hamon Khan, you know. But anyway, we went to make Maghrib in a masjid there, you know. And after the Salah, they form a semicircle, you know. So when you go out, you greet everybody. And that custom is amongst us here too. So I said, there, it comes from that place. I'm not, you know the name? Amnat was my second memory. It's on the islands, but it's a lovely place. Because we took the bus from there to come back to Jakarta. We also went to Bogor. The president's office is in Bogor. Beautiful country. And then I had the fortune of traveling with Professor Abdul Salam through the villages in Indonesia. What a beautiful place. So if you have money, I'll be your guide, I'll take you over.
Any other questions? I think maybe just the last question from me.
Sure.
It was the Methodist church was in Main Road that was broken down. Now, in some of the other books that I've read, they all mention they're not sure why it was torn down, but they believe it was because they had to broaden the streets. But you mentioned something very interesting now this morning in your talk. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Where you believe that the church was attended by too many colored people?
Yes. You see, originally, the church was also a beacon for the fishermen because it was the highest point in the community. So they could use the tower to guide them through that narrow opening. The kham, they call it the kham. The church was originally mostly the fishermen here and the Christians, those who embraced the Methodist church, right? In the apartheid years, that church was a sore eye with so many colored people right smack in the CBD. And when I was invited to the Synod of the Methodist Church, there were about 250 delegates from all over. So I told the chairman, I think you need to investigate. Why is it that they destroyed this beautiful church in the town, in the center of the town? It was built in 1912. And I got some lovely pictures of the church too. And he said, yes, they think this. Because then what they did afterwards, they built their own white church in Berganet Street. Now what does it tell you? They were implementing the apartheid policy, even though they were Methodists. They were in cahoots with the system. Yeah. We can't deny that. So I'm waiting. Oh yes, my mother was baptized in that church. She was 2 years old with the elder brother, Uncle Henry Dreyer. She was a Dreyer. Her father was a fisherman, he drowned, and she married a Muslim. And she became Muslim with her mother. Her mother's name was Habiba eventually. That is why I have a sister by the name of Habiba. And she was 2 years old when she was baptized. I found the baptismal certificate in the baptismal register of the Methodist Church in Somerset West. So I'm half Methodist, half
Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to say something. I found your rendition of this talk absolutely fantastic. In view of the fact that you can remember all the dates and the names and the places and so forth. And I think, I personally feel I'm honored to listen to this for the second time maybe. And I'll keep on listening to you because I found it absolutely fantastic. And I don't know if everybody agrees with me, I think we must give it up, Ebrahim another hand. Yeah,
I think I inherited it from my aunt, she's Rahima Krombi. She couldn't read or write. But I spent a lot of time with her, you know. And I say, for an African sister, well, we call the sisters, my brother's sister, she died at the age of 90. I say, sister, tell me, wie was onze opa, you know, and then she started rattling. Not only about my family, but all the major families like the Raiduns, the Wensels, the Badruns, the Daniels, the Fanis, van die Strand. Most of those names that she mentioned, when I started digging in the archives, I found the majority of those families. Because if you lived, you must have died. Then there's a record of you. Now our records only start from about 1895 in the archives, you know. But for the other communities, it goes right back to the time of Van Riebeeck, the records. The oldest one in the archives, for your information, is a prayer that Van Riebeeck made when he was coming through the English Channel, coming to the Cape, that God must give him a safe journey. But that's in a glass case, you can't touch it. What they're doing in the archives now, they're trying to digitize most of the records, so you can put it on a CD or you can put it on a disk or whatever. It's beautiful. Otherwise, by handling all those documents, eventually they will be destroyed. So at least the Dutch government made, I think, a huge amount available about a couple of years ago. And there was a team working in the archives. They worked mostly on the inventories of the farmers here at the Cape. And they could tell you what was in the lounge, what was in the kitchen, you know, all the items. And there was a group that worked on that. And there's now on the CD. One of the big guns also there, that's a fundi on slavery, is Professor Robert Sell. He died a couple of years ago, and his wife phoned me, he says, Ebrahim, they call him Rob. Rob wasn't very religious, so there's not going to be a church service. But would you come to the grace site and say a few words? Now, he was a huge man, Robert Sell. So we went to the Maitland Cemetery, my wife and I, and all the fundis of Stellenbosch University and UCT, they're all there to say farewell to Robert Sell. You know, these people, they know so much about our history, but they are not stingy, they share it with anybody. And that was my experience. Another lady there in the archives, she used to write for the Argus, Jackie Luce. You must have heard about her. And whenever they find something, they would come to you, Mr. Rhoda, this is something about the Muslims, can you use it? Sharing, the network of sharing. En sometimes van ons eie mense, ons hou die goed net so vas, hulle wil nie deel met ander nie.
If I must say something, I just want to echo what you actually say. I think with Mr. Rhoda's research, he actually awakened something in our town which we must cherish forever. So we're so much gratefulness towards Mr. Rhoda for actually landing this with us. And I mean, I'm using this analogy, and Professor Aziz knows I've used it before already. I'm referencing versus Christopher Columbus. When he went on his excursions, and when he came back, he couldn't tell anybody where he went, and he couldn't even tell where he was. Yet in this specific case, Mr. Rhoda, he actually can tell us exactly where we're coming from and who we are. And I think that is a great, great achievement.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rhoda.
Thank you. I just want to echo the same with Aminia in.
Mind you, he was in my class too, and here.
I was in Mr. Rhoda's. Mr. Rhoda was my teacher 1985 when I was standard 5. Yes. I echo the same. Mr. Daniels, we as Strand Community is indebted to Mr. Rhoda. For all the hard work, but specifically his research is academically published. And based on that, we have a reference to go. And due to that studies, it can be implemented in our syllabus in our schools. So we indebted to Mr. Rhoda. Shukran, Mr. Rhoda. Shukran to you, your team. And,
I want to add this.
Yeah.
I saw people coming in the archive, you know. I virtually lived in the archive for 2 years. When I found so much evidence of this community, then I saw from my own people and across the spectrum of race and religion, krap hier en krap daar, en sê ek, wat soek moet dan nie, hy kom die soek. So I joined, we established the Cape Family Research Forum in 2001. under Shamil Khamildin and Doan Wahid, Hanif Kamadin, and Hafiz Samaudin, all these guys. I joined them. So I said, look, we can do a service to community if we train people how to do research. So I got permission from the archive to take photos. And then we developed the PowerPoint, right? And I think in 2012 we started. And I think that was the first one, so we had Jackie Lewis and Professor Newton King as our guest speakers at this. For 4.5 to 5 hours, you first get the guided tour of the archives. There's about 45 kilometers of shelving, all filled with volumes and volumes of records. So after that, then we take you into the conference room and we show you how to go about to access the records. Whether it's the slave records, whether it's the death registers, whether it's the testaments or wills. And to date, we've trained more than 300 people to do their own research. You pay a nominal fee because we provide some tea and drinks and persistence, and it costs money and the stationery. So you pay a very small fee. I told our guys, look, let's not make a fee impossible for people to come. Make it affordable. So I think it was 100 rand or something like that. That's free. And alhamdulillah, we lit little fires and they're burning all over. Yes, alhamdulillah.
I might just mention, so Mr. Rhoda's sister, Habiba Rhoda, 60 years ago, she was my sub-8 teacher by Rahmania in District 6.
I've looked at that. Ik kan die van meneer Daniels, hij was bij permanent geweest. Nee, nou, hij had na by die school gebly, nou speel hulle cricket en hij was nog een ander klomp de Ami van meneer Crombie. Nou van my mis, nou skel hy van Ami op die doen.
Sir, you're not supposed to steal. To that level of business.
Okay, everybody, I think let's put our hands together again once again. Like everything, I'm going to urge everybody, please spread the word about this wonderful book. Writers only continue writing when there are people reading their books. They are not in it for the money. No one is going to drive a Ferrari from the book sales. But I think it's important to maintain our history, and it's wonderful for us at Sunset Books to now have a balanced view of history and not just a one-sided one. So thank you so much, Ebrahim. It was wonderful, and I learned so much.
About this book, my wife had a beautiful idea. We call it the Sadaqatul Jariyah. It's a charity that you give that for as long as it's being used, you get the benefit of it, the reward from the Almighty. So she said, let us donate. Who says?
In this world and in the year.
In the year after. So I'm in the penthouse in the year after. Anyway, so she said, let's donate 1,000 copies. Now, to be able to do that, I had to find people to print the book. So I went to some of my friends, look, will you be able to sponsor the printing of the book? Because we're going to give 1,000 copies to the community. Then I went to all the stakeholders. Now, this is the beauty of working together. I went to all of them. I know there's fragmentation. I said, look, this is our heritage. Will you help me to sell the book? And I gave a friend of mine, Faisal Musa, he's got a stationery shop, he gave me 10 receipts. He said, go out there and sell the book, that the poorest of the poor can pay it off. So at the launch in the town in 2014, we invited the Consul General of Indonesia, Suki Harijati. She's the one that took me over. So she also came. And at the launch, 400 signed copies went out. And we sold traditional Malay dishes, gesmorde vis, frikadel and dal, the end of tea and things like that. And that day we raised 93,000 rand. We put that under the auspices of the Strand Muslim Council, we call it the Heritage Fund. The 600 that was left, wherever I gave a talk, and when I came in affluent areas, then she praised Uhuru. So eventually we raised and we invested the money for a while in the Jais Manir, the Al Baraka, and eventually the total came to 225,000 rand.
Can go flat now.
That's the girl, yeah. So we made Nia, and then we started assisting the widows of our imams, because we're not strong as the churches. We had a pension fund. And each month we gave them an amount out of this. I think the last amount they got was last year in Ramadan. So the letter was this: you will receive this amount for as long as this sum can be sustained. When it's not transferable if you die, we have to make sure, you know. So we make very sure of that. And the last amount that was paid out last year in Ramadan, so each one of them, there were 5 of them, they each got 800 rand was the last amount. So we sort of completed my wife's wish to make a sadaqah tunjar.
If I may, just finally, to round things up,
Yes, yes.
if the host allow me, someone here, I think Mr. Faisal will know about it. A national award was afforded to, I think must mention the detail around it first, if you don't mind, or anyone who knows more detail?
I think Mr. Rhoda must share this thing, it's maybe.
It was better from someone else, I think.
He invited me to actually go with him, unfortunately I had another appointment with him. Mr. Rhoda, maybe you can, I know it's good.
Now, I was nominated for the Ubuntu Award. And so myself and Dr. Deacon, she was also into research. So normally at that function they have it in various centers around the country. This year, or last year, it was held in the Cape Arts Center in Cape Town. So there are 10 categories. It includes art, and it includes the visual arts, and it includes the music, or whatever. And the first prize is 30,000, and the runner-up prize is 10,000. So at this function, when it came to the Ubuntu one, which is the top one, the judges decided no, they are going to award both of them the first prize. So myself and Dr. Deacon, we each got 30,000 rand. But the beauty of it is that I have 5 grandchildren, so the one granddaughter said, yes, Opa, 30,000 divided by 5 is 6,000 for each of us. Alhamdulillah. No, this has been very rewarding.
We talk about all the wonderful things that you say. Who's going to inherit whatever you've done over the years?
Yes. The
There's
fortunate part.
there's also the issue of your local community.
Yes. I'm appealing to Professor, as the chairman, give me some youngsters that I can train in the archives on a one-to-one basis, instead of taking a whole group. We can identify youngsters who are, number one, you must have a passion for the work. You know, if you don't love anything, you won't enjoy it. So if you have a passion, if we can find that, and there I'm appealing to you through the other, the council, and of course the principle of Raja. If there are any, the younger they start, the better, to make them au fait of how it works to do research.
My question wasn't that, but okay, good answer. What's your perception in attempts to get this community together? And whatever those attempts are, it's one of my areas that I'm a specialist in.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to assist you.
Yes. Well, my idea is have a think tank. Get the leadership together. We did this in 1963. So the late Maulana Karan came back from India in 62. He drafted the constitution single-handedly. And then there was another organization called the Strand Muslim Society. So we were supposed to explain to the imams. So there were 4 imams at that time. We went to them and said, look, this is the constitution of the council, this is how it will work. It went all very well, but it came to one point, and the point was the issue of the Baitul Mal, the Fitra and the Zakat and things like that. So there's the whole thing floundered. But then we came back in 65 with another strategy, and maybe that will answer your question too. Maulana invited all the stakeholders, and we used the very same constitution, but we asked them for their input. It was 1965. And we sat for about 3-4 months going through clause by clause, and then we went to the public and said, look, this is what we've drafted. We are not asking you to elect a committee, but we have nominated people who are the architects of this constitution. They will know how to implement it. And we ask you to ratify. And the meeting agreed. So that committee that I showed you, the 9, those were the 9. So we asked for a trial period of 1 year. Some of the elderly stood up and said, a year is too long, we give you 6 months, you won't be there anymore. Whatever you do, give us a chance. And after a year, we came back. And the beauty of this is when we came back, the community never had funds in the reserve. So for the first time in the history of the community, we had a reserve of 800 Rand in the bank. And in addition, we produced an audited financial statement. Total transparency, total accountability. And I think that was a success by the council, moved off so nicely. But then again, later on, the split came. Maybe we should try something similar, get a think tank. You know, the leadership in the community.
If I may respond to your question. Myself and Mr. Rhoda, with the assistance of my sister, now recently put together something for the application for the Ben Friedemann plan that has now been acknowledged to be the Strand Community Plan. There we brought the 3 different Jamaas together into one forum, into a meeting, and we successfully did it. So yes, everything, if I may quote Mandela, and say everything looks impossible until it's been made possible. So everything is possible. I think I want to add on to Mr. Rhoda what he's saying. I think if you set up a forum and you bring people together, although I do think that the type of discussion we're having now, this is not necessarily the place for it, but I think it is definitely possible, in my opinion. Right. So I'll just stop now.
Are you satisfied, Mr. We're going to try that way. Inshallah. You know what, inshallah means God willing. Now we traveled with a girlie on the boat on the Nile. She was from the east, Japan or something. Then she told Amina, you know, my husband worked in Sudan, there in the textile factory. But every time they say inshallah, they tell lies, they never do it.
Okay, let's substitute it with a better word.
Okay, give it to me.
Bi'idhnillah.
Bi'idhnillah. And the meaning?
With the permission of Allah.
With the permission of God, yes.
Amen.
Amen. Udin, I think from my side, I must thank Udin for putting us in the limelight. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.